Namaste and Siddhi Pranam. Welcome to today's topic, which is hormonal and emotional health and its impact on fertility. So let's dive into understanding our hormonal health and emotional health and their interplay. So hormones and emotions are intricately linked and influence each other in a very dynamic feedback loop. So emotional state can impact hormonal balance, while hormonal fluctuations can affect mood and emotional health. So our hormones play a very crucial role in regulating the menstrual cycle for women and ovulation and reproductive health. So really maintaining hormonal balance is very, very crucial and essential for fertility and also our overall well-being. And emotional stressors like any kind of anxiety, depression, certain unresolved trauma within can really disrupt our hormonal health and negatively impact our fertility outcomes. So addressing emotional health is very vital for optimizing fertility potential. Let's understand hormonal regulation in the menstrual cycle. So let's delve deeper into the hormonal fluctuation that occurs throughout the menstrual cycle and their significance for fertility. So the primary hormones involved in the menstrual cycle are estrogen, progesterone, follicle stimulating hormone, which is FSH, and luteinizing hormone, which is LH. And they play key roles in regulating menstrual cycle and ovulation. We have understood the role of these hormones previously also, but just giving you a quick overview so that we can dive into understanding how they're impacted by our emotional health. So coming on to estrogen first. So primarily estrogen is produced in ovaries, and estrogen plays a crucial role in stimulating the growth and release of the eggs during the menstrual cycle. And it also helps thicken the uterine lining, creating an optimal environment for the implantation in the uterus. Progesterone produced by the ovaries after the ovulation is there, and progesterone prepares the uterine lining for implantation and maintains pregnancy if the fertilization occurs. Follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH, these hormones produced by the pituitary gland regulates the menstrual cycle and ovulation. So FSH stimulates the growth of follicles in the ovary, while LH triggers the ovulation. The next important hormone is prolactin. So although primarily associated with breastfeeding, prolactin levels can affect fertility by suppressing ovulation when elevated. So if the woman has not become a mother yet she contains a certain amount of prolactin in the body, but if it's on the elevated level, what occurs is that they impact the fertility health also. So next hormones are thyroid hormones, and thyroid hormones includes T3, T4, which plays a very crucial role in regulating our metabolic rate as well as menstrual cycle. So thyroid imbalances can disrupt our ovulation and fertility. And when we talk about menstrual cycle and the phases and the hormonal changes, so the menstrual cycle really consists of follicular, ovulatory, and luteal phase, which we have really gone into quite depth while we were on the menstrual cycle chapter, and how it occurs. So each fluctuation in the hormones take a role of a different phase in the menstrual cycle. So whenever the hormones fluctuate, they either end or start a new phase in the menstrual cycle. So understanding, having an understanding of these phases, they really optimize the fertility health for the women. So they know what to do when and which practices are favorable in which phase of their menstrual cycle during the whole month. There have been detailed scientific research on what foods to eat in which menstrual cycle phase, what are favorable. For example, when you are about to menstruate, let's say a week before the periods for the women begin, we need to increase certain amount of hormones in the body, which requires us to eat more carbohydrates and relax our body. So nowadays there has been extensive research on how we can support our hormonal health with help of diet and certain exercises. For example, we should not be doing any strenuous work or even exercises a week prior to the beginning of our menstrual cycle, because that puts a lot more stress on the body, which the body is already in the process of it's in the luteal phase and it's already going through a lot of stress. So what we would rather do is practice only gentle yoga exercises or gentle yoga asanas, which puts us into very relaxed mode. And by the time our period ends, let's say around third or fourth day, we can start doing things that requires more effort. Maybe, the Ashtanga yoga or, hard workouts. So when a woman understands her phases of hormonal fluctuations and how the hormones are taking place and what kind of food and activities are in resonance and coherence, and what kind of stressors she should take in which part of the menstrual stage cycle, that determines how well she maintains her hormonal health. So if she's stretching too much, let's say on the work front or family front, and she has so many stressors right before her period begins, she is going to damage her hormonal health. Also, her periods will be way more painful. On the contrary, if she chooses to relax a week prior to her menstrual cycle and is doing a calming routine, and she reduces her work burden by 50%, let's say, and chooses to relax more and eat more carbohydrates, which are essential to generate certain hormones in the body to be able to enter in the menstrual phase. So all that really supports her menstrual cycle. So that is really optimizing the level of fertility also, and also supporting her overall health. Now, getting into the emotional health and fertility once again. So let's understand the impact of stress on our fertility. So chronic stress triggers the release of the hormone cortisol, and cortisol is a stress hormone that can disrupt the balance of reproductive hormones, leading to irregular menstrual cycle and ovulation and decreased fertility. At the same time, anxiety and depression also works much similarly. So mental health conditions where someone is medically diagnosed with depression, or even they carry a lot of anxiety, both of these together can affect the fertility by altering the hormone levels, influencing the life of the person otherwise. But there are the factors that impact or contribute to mental health. That includes how we eat, how we work out, and how well we sleep. Another important thing is any kind of trauma and emotional blockages. So unresolved emotional trauma and psychological stressor can manifest physically and can impact our reproductive system and fertility. So addressing emotional blockages is really essential for restoring hormonal balance and optimizing fertility. Now, let's discuss the interplay of hormones and the impact of emotional state on the hormonal health. So hormones and emotions are deeply interconnected, forming a very complex web of psychological and physiological responses within the body. And understanding this interplay is really crucial in comprehending how our emotional health can significantly impact hormonal balance and vice versa. So when we begin with understanding, how the stress response works. So when the body perceives stress, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, it releases the cortisols, as we discussed earlier, which is the primary stress hormone, and elevated cortisol level disrupt the delicate balance of reproductive hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, FSH, and LH. So all these levels are disrupted by presence of excessive cortisol. What's important to note is certain amount of cortisol is good for our body and is required for us to operate. So when you wake up, by the time you are 1 hour up already, our cortisol level starts to rise up just to give us that little energy to go by the day. But that is called healthy stress to a certain level. But the moment it goes beyond a certain level where we are just too much worried about our future, or constantly in a very contracted state where our body is constantly contracted and we don't feel light at all, we don't feel healthy, or we don't feel lightheaded, like it's all that is signs of rising cortisol levels in our body. And this disruption that the cortisol causes to our hormones can lead to irregular menstrual cycle and reduced fertility, as we discussed that. So let's understand the feedback loop also. So hormonal regulations operate through integrate feedback loops involving hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and the ovaries in the female. So emotional stressors disrupt these feedback mechanisms. And what it does, it affects the release and regulation of hormones essential for the reproductive organ. So the entire system that we have discussed on how the egg is released and how certain menstruation, how the menstruation cycle works, and which hormones rising up or decreasing at a certain level does work. So that whole functionality are interconnected with each other. So the moment stress is higher, that feedback loop and feedback mechanism is disrupted. Now next is endocrine disruption. So chronic stress and emotional disturbances can also impact our endocrine glands such as thyroid and adrenal glands, and further it exacerbates the hormonal imbalance. So thyroid hormones plays a very crucial role in regulating metabolism and menstrual cycles. So while adrenal hormones influence stress responses and energy level in the body. So all this is disrupted due to the presence of excessive stress or chronic stress. Now let's understand the impact on the emotional health. So anxiety and depression, these are part of mental health conditions. There are many other mental health conditions, but these are the primary main that are being noticed these days, and they profoundly affect the hormonal balance. So whenever there are imbalances, what it does is it also imbalances the neurotransmitters in our brain, such as serotonin and dopamine, which is associated with the mood regulation. So dopamine release and serotonin release is very important for our mood regulation. And when they disrupt this, the chronic stress disrupt this one, what happens is that it further disrupts the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal. This is called HPA axis. So, and also hypothalamus pituitary gonadal, which is HPG axis. All those once disrupted again further disrupts and leads to irregular menstrual cycle and ovulation. Now let's understand how trauma and emotional blockages impact. So unresolved emotional trauma and psychological stressors manifest physically in form of impacting the reproductive health and fertility. They also impact many other organs. Of course, it has overall damage to our body. but they are also great contributors sometimes in damage to our reproductive health. Now, trauma induces hormonal dysregulation, which often results or shows up as polycystic ovarian syndrome in female, and also hypothalamic amenorrhea, and also luteal phase defects, and that again affects the fertility outcome. So most likely, if you encounter a female who has been diagnosed with PCOS, is more likely to have a blocked trauma or emotional blockage. Now, the role of hormones in the emotional health once again. So, neuroendocrine signaling. So, hormones act as chemical messenger also that influences the brain function and the emotional responses at the same time. So first we were discussing that from an angle of how emotions impacts our hormones. Now we are discussing other way around how hormones impact our emotional health. So hormones literally act as a chemical messenger that influence our brain function and emotional responses. For example, if estrogen and progesterone receptors are present in the area of brain associated with mood, regulation and emotional processing, the fluctuation in these hormones throughout the menstrual cycle will affect the mood and the emotional well-being. So the moment they are higher in value or lower in value as compared to whatever value is considered as a balanced value, they will adversely affect our mood and our behavior, especially in the woman. So as we know that hormone changes across the menstrual cycle, so hormonal fluctuation during the menstrual cycle also influences our emotional state. So the premenstrual phase, which is characterized by changes in the estrogen and progesterone levels, is often associated with mood swings, irritability, and emotional sensitivity also in some women. So if they are anyway common, but if our hormones are imbalanced to a large extent, then these expressions or mood swings or level of irritability can go higher, and they will vice versa. For example, the woman is already irritated, anxious, and something happens that aggravates that irritation, that converts into further anxiety, that converts into way more, a lot more anger, then that will further damage the hormones. So it is not that it's it's really working in a circle where the more worse your mood gets, the worse in your hormonal health gets, and the worse in your hormonal health gets, the worse in your emotional health and mental health gets. So that's how crucial it is to have and maintain the balance and keep them in check, in balance. So let's talk about addressing the emotional health and hormonal imbalance. So mind-body practices. If the woman incorporates mind-body practices like yoga, meditation, and mindfulness, that can really help her manage stress, regulate emotions, and promote hormonal balance. And these practices, basically what it does is activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which reduces our cortisol level and restores the equilibrium in the endocrine system. Another add-on can be counseling and therapy. So really seeking support from mental health professionals can be beneficial for addressing any underlying emotional issues or processing trauma and developing coping strategies. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or also known as CBT, and mindfulness-based intervention and trauma-informed approaches can also help women with hormonal disruptions to navigate through emotional challenges and support her hormonal health. So if you see or are interact with women who are dealing with such thing, it's always great to suggest them to have certain kind of practices that can address. So in most cases, if it's just a lifestyle issue, then it can be managed by the mind-body practices. But if she carries a lot of emotional trauma, then there is requirement to visit someone professional as a counselor, a psychologist, or a psychotherapy, or a trauma informed coach, anyone who can really help with dealing with emotional challenges that can really support her hormonal health and fertility health. Now, coming on to techniques for hormonal balance and emotional well-being. So let's really explore the practical techniques and practices for promoting hormonal health. So yogasanas, there are many yogasanas that can be used for hormonal regulation, and certain yoga postures, like especially postures which involves hip opening and gentle inversions, can stimulate reproductive organs involved in the reproductive system and improve blood flow to the pelvic region and also promote hormonal balance. Pranayamas are also great to support the reproductive health in a manner that they reduce stress. And when we practice deep breathing techniques such as abdominal breathing and alternative nostril breathing, Nadi Shodha Pranayama, etc., can really activate the parasympathetic nervous system that promotes relaxation and reduce stress level. Now, meditation and visualization for emotional healing. So we can also use guided meditation and visualization practices that can really help cultivate a positive mindset for women and reduce level of anxiety and connect with their innate fertility potential. There are now lifestyle strategies that we can use for enhancing our hormonal health. So integrating lifestyle changes and self-care practices can really help in optimizing the hormonal health. So first would be the nutrition for hormonal balance. So a balanced, rich diet can really support the fertility. So a diet which is rich in folate, iron, omega-3 fatty acids can promote hormonal balance and reproductive health. We have had a very deep chapter on nutrition for hormonal health or fertility. If we follow those that we are taking care, that our diet is well diverse, comes from good and organic sources, all of that can really support our reproductive health. Now, sleep has a great role to play in it, and sleep hygiene and also our sleep routine has a great impact on our hormones. So prioritizing sleep and creating a bedtime routine can really help in hormonal regulation and our overall well-being also. And adding some self-care practices for emotional wellness can also really be supportive. So some women can choose to engage in activities that promotes relaxation and self-care, maybe spending time in nature, practicing gratitude, and seeking support from loved ones. Always having someone by their side. I mean, just knowing inside that they can contact someone when they're not feeling good. So having those kind of close ones, loved ones in their life, and reaching out to them whenever needed are great emotional care, self-care practices to be added. Now, integrating hormonal and emotional health into your yoga teaching. So as yoga teachers, we can really play a very vital role in supporting our students in their holistic well-being. So how can you really support the students with hormonal imbalance? So what you can really do is create a safe and supportive space for students to really explore their emotional and hormonal health, and allow them to that space to talk to you and be able to understand the importance of maintaining a good emotional and hormonal health. And you can encourage them to open to communicate, and you can also provide certain resources to support their understanding of the impact of their emotional and hormonal health on their fertility. Now, you can also create a very emotionally supportive environment inside of a yoga class. So you can foster a nurturing and non-judgmental atmosphere in your classes where students can feel comfortable expressing their emotions, and also give them more opportunity to connect to their bodies. And how can we really add hormonal balancing practices into our yoga class? So you can, when you're designing a class, you can design hormonal health or reproductive health specific classes where you integrate those poses that has highest impact on the reproductive organs. Also, what you can integrate is good pranayama techniques or certain different breathing techniques that supports the reproductive health. You can add on special visualization and meditation practices that can promote hormonal balance, also promote the emotional well-being of the would-be mothers. This is a great role that you can play as teachers. So our goal can be really here to work on the nervous system, balancing the nervous system, and bringing the nervous system of the would-be mothers or women who are wishing to be pregnant from a sympathetic nervous system mode, which is so our nervous system is divided into parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic nervous system is the zone of the nervous system where we are anxious and we have a lot of adrenaline to operate, but there are levels of how much stress we can take on. But the parasympathetic nervous system is the state of calmness and stillness and relaxation. So our job is to bring the nervous system into balanced state, and all the practices, tools that you already possess as a yoga teacher has great potential to contribute to women's hormonal and emotional health. So we can use all of that, and if you're aware enough, you can always guide them to use trauma healing practices or counseling and add on healing practices to support their mental and emotional well-being. With that, I really hope this was helpful and helps you help more and more women and men in their journey to be fertile and journey to become parents. Thank you and namaste.